This is a good full house for Valentine's. I guess y'all had nothing else going on, or? No, it's our great pleasure. You know, if I was going to pick a place to spend my Valentine's Day, being a nerd who loves all things made locally, I couldn't have picked a better place. So to have the privilege of being here tonight and kind of hosting our friends and fellow SF Made manufacturers with all of you, I can't think of a better thing to do on a Valentine's Day. So I've been given full license to use as many heart and love schmaltzy metaphors throughout the evening. So I'm going to start with one. If you had to say why your business or why you left your heart in San Francisco, how would you say, why are you here? Why are you here, and what do you love about being here?
I guess, hey Dina, happy Valentine's. Sorry, we couldn't get sushi.
And you may not know everyone, but this is Justin from Fort Point.
Yeah, Justin from Fort Point. Yeah. Mainly, it's my home, and I love the city and the burritos.
Do you have any particular beer burrito pairings that inform your recipes for your beers?
Yeah, unfortunately, El Farolito doesn't sell craft beer, so Negra Modelo and a super vegetarian burrito.
But not a particular Fort Point.
Not
brew
a particular
that
Fort Point beer.
Particular
Fort Point beer with Mexican food. I kind of think that our Westphalia has this kind of Negro Modelo quality that I'm really really happy about. So I'd say that one.
All right. And we don't need to go in a line, so whoever feels inspired next. Why is your heart in San Francisco? Why is your business here? Dave.
Well,
this is Dave from Magnolia.
Hey. Magnolia's here because I moved here because I was drawn to San Francisco from the East Coast, mostly chasing after the Grateful Dead.
You have something in common with my boyfriend who's in the front row, so you guys can talk later.
Nice. But I stayed because I loved it, and it lived up to my expectations and my preconceived notions. It exceeded them. This is the early 90s, 1991, so it was a great time to discover the city, and I was at the same time, just kind of doubling down on my passion for brewing and beer and home brewing, and I never thought about doing it anywhere but San Francisco.
Where are you from originally?
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So that's a town known for its beer. But you came out here anyways to pursue that.
Yeah. And one of the storylines among many is that even back then it was kind of, it was a craft beer mecca at a time before that movement had spread everywhere else. So it was really something where I'd see beers starting to make their way to the East Coast that were all made here somewhere in Northern California. And it was a draw.
Well, and I can't resist to kind of then make the connection to Anchor, which I think for many was sort of, and is sort of still viewed as the grand dame, the father of a lot of the craft brewing we see here. And Scott, you sort of intentionally in some ways made your way to Anchor and maybe accidentally at the same time, but.
Yeah, well, when Dave says craft beer mecca, the reason San Francisco is a craft beer mecca is because of Anchor Brewing. And there's that obvious connection that we've been making San Francisco's beer since the 1890s and really before that. For me, personally, I grew up in the Bay Area. I went to college across the Bay. I toured the Anchor Brewery for the first time exactly 30 years ago. And it was, for me, the eye-opener of what a beautiful and magical place a brewery can be. The first time I walked in that brewery, and inspired me to become a home brewer and inspired me to go study brewing. I never thought I'd come back and work here. It was just that inspiration that set me off on a certain path, and I went far and wide and came back 3 years ago and came back to Anchor, to return full circle to the place that inspired me, and why San Francisco, because they make Anchor here. That's why. Because that's what I cared about more than more than what I was doing at the time. And when I had the opportunity to come back to Anchor to come make beer at Anchor, it was a unique example of like a lifetime's work culminating in the absolute perfect opportunity at the perfect time, and I jumped at it, and I came back here, and I'm so happy to be part of this. And to be part of the lineage is, it's, I don't know how to even describe how special it is. It's just right in the center of it. Every day I walk into that brewery and I'm still as inspired as I was 30 years ago.
How many people have taken a tour of Anchor? So the rest of you,
the rest of you need
to be
to,
going
yeah.
on a tour of Anchor. Well,
You're all invited.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
And
that
they
hard.
They book up in
You
advance,
do hear
but-
that it takes months in advance. I mean, let me
does.
tell you, Tuesday morning, 10 a.m., there's never anybody there. There's always like these people get this special tour with Caleb. There's like 3-5 people, right? Caleb, you take them up on the brew house floor. Tuesday morning, 10 a.m., book it. Let's do it.
Where's Caleb?
Next week. It's right there.
Oh. So, and I need to also recognize that SF Made itself is a nonprofit, and all we do is work to help remove impediments for manufacturers just here in San Francisco to grow, and Anchor is our largest manufacturer. So I think not only a leader in craft beer, but really a role model for other makers and manufacturers of all sizes here in the city. Which I guess is a great counterpoint to turn to Reagan. You're one of our younger breweries here in the city, and what inspired you to start and establish your company here in the city?
Yeah, well, I've been here in the city for 20 years, and I think locals here because, having been here for 20 years, just really seeing an evolution. I came here for school back in like 1996 and loved the city right out of the gates. I'm originally from Oregon and just really got sucked in by the culture and just the fact that, when you drive over the bridge or you fly into San Francisco, you're like, oh man, it's awe-inspiring, right? Just, I love the city. And so I've been here ever since, and I think, had kind of a sciencey, businessy day job, but always loved homebrewing that I started up when I was living in Oregon. And really felt like maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, met this guy. Well, actually, it was longer ago than that, but actually thought about making beer a business about 5 or 6 years ago. But, really felt like in San Francisco, there was an opportunity. There was a lot of brew pubs and there was a lot of production breweries, but there wasn't anything really in between at that time. Now, I mean, there's definitely a lot of what we call a destination brewery and beer bar, right? Where you go to a place and it maybe doesn't feel 100% like a warehousey type of brewery. It feels like kind of a cool place where you go and hang out, and so we felt like there was an opportunity to do something cool in that space, like add to the culture and the background that was currently in the city as far as brewing industry goes. And so really started doing some market research, and we started talking to our neighbors. We took beer homebrew out to Dolores Park under the radar, did feedback forums. Dave knows about this. We were not supposed to be doing it, but at the end of the day, we got feedback forms. We just wanted to find out, did the San Francisco audience and customers, what would be our customers, really want what we had kind of envisioned? And we saw that they did, and we got the feedback that they did. And so we've just, for the last, basically we opened our spot about 1.5 years ago.
Which is where?
On Bluxom Street. It's a 2-block long street in South of Market. It's a super cool little neighborhood, and what we really feel like we're bringing, what we love about the city is that we still see every day that enthusiasm that I would feel when I drive over the bridge or fly into the city, of people that love San Francisco and they love handmade products and just the passion around making whatever it is, manufacturing, whether it's beer or apparel or Timbuktu bags or whatever, people really love that and appreciate it, and so that's why we're here. So.
Well, and I think one of the things that we see not only among the breweries but other local manufacturers is this externalization of the craft of making. So I think all four of you have found ways to bring your consumer kind of into your production process. And I wonder if you would take 2 minutes. I mean, we have tours at Anchor. Dave, you've just undertaken a pretty major move from really starting as a restaurant in the Haight with a small brewing capacity to, it's almost flipped the other way around now. You're a bigger brewery with a bigger restaurant. What's that transition like? How many people have been to the original Magnolia in the Haight? And how about the new Magnolia in the Dog Patch? So what's that? That's a pretty big kind of flip and emphasis for you guys.
Yeah, it was kind of like learning how to become a completely different business. And I knew that, but I don't think I knew the extent of it. And you know, you can trace all your steps back and like think about how you got where you got and what you did and what. And in the beginning, it was in the 90s. It was a pretty binary decision typically for a brewery to be, you know, a production brewery or a brew pub. I mean, those were kind of the two paths. You
So
could
it was
go down.
one or the other.
It was, yeah. And as much as I came at it as a brewer and had sort of had determined that I was going to make that my craft and kind of my calling, the part that really excited me was like, well, you could fuse it all together with the whole pub concept. And I had been on some amazing trips to England where I went to visit breweries, but I ended up falling in love with the pub culture too, and the way they're the social institution, the glue that holds the community together. So I got really into the community aspect of it, and I was drawn to that, and that's why I opened Magnolia as a brew pub, even though I was really mostly focused on the beer. And so, it became our identity for a long time, but there was still that other part of me that is like, well, but I'm really into the beer part, and I wanted to keep growing the brewery and growing the beer brand, and so learning how to be a two restaurant operation with 2 production facilities and getting into distribution, which is a whole different animal, and I've been around it for almost 30 years, but you don't really know until you do it, but the thread through all of that is that the community aspect of beer is the kind of the glue that ties it all together for me. So whether you're bringing people to your brew pub or your restaurant or your tasting room or whatever it is, or whether you're interacting with people sort of one step removed by them enjoying your beer somewhere else, it's still like there's this notion that beer is this really community building beverage.
Now, Justin, Fort Point is also one of our younger breweries, but also has been sort of nationally recognized as being one of the faster growing craft breweries. How do you balance sort of being seen as such a fast growing company, and at the same time, I also understand you all still try to do a lot under your own control, including doing your own distribution. So how do you make that work?
It's definitely, it's kind of, one of the values of our company is a very DIY kind of culture and mentality. And, we've become the largest self-distributed brewery in San Francisco. And we really like that challenge. We have a lot of fun, like taking on that problem. And really, I think what that comes from is, essentially what, we have built is a giant erector set for adults. Like, it's funny when something breaks in the brewery, I think a lot of people
And the
are like...
brewery's in the Presidio?
That's in the Presidio. And when something breaks in the brewery, I think a lot of people are like always really surprised that I try to like jump in the mix and try to get involved in the repairing of that, because that's the thing about the business that I love the most is that we're building something with our hands and we're making something, and often when the conversation of kind of outsourcing anything kind of comes up, whether it's distribution or HR or something like that, there's always kind of this driving force of like us wanting to do it ourselves, and that's really fun and exciting. And when people ask, how big do we want to make Fort Point? Because we're growing so quickly, I think a lot of people are always curious, like, is there something you're trying to achieve by growing this quickly? we're gonna keep growing while it's fun to grow. You know, like I'm excited about tanks that we're about to get pretty soon, and I'm excited about the floor drains that we're installing right now.
And can we actually see this? Is this similar to Anchor? We can take a tour? Or?
Unfortunately, there's some regulations because we're in the Presidio that we cannot be open to the public. We do have a small tap room in the Ferry Building, which is very busy and fun, and it's a great San Francisco institution to be affiliated with. And we hope that maybe one day that we can get some small kind of public thing going at our brewery in the Presidio, but it really is just a factory and a giant erector set.
So that's maybe one of the challenges. And just briefly, for those who might not be deeply immersed in brewing, what does it mean to self-distribute? I have visions of like people in pedicabs delivering cases of beer. What does that mean? What's the significance of you saying we self-distribute versus not self-distribute?
I think local self-distributes as well, right?
Do you self-distribute?
Yeah.
All right, then
So-
jump
so
in.
there's-
What does it mean to
personally.
self-distribute versus these guys that I guess don't self-distribute? Is that?
No, we
You guys used to probably at one point as well.
yeah,
right?
certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, when Fritz bought the company in 1965,
Fritz
he was driving beer around himself. But as we grew
In a car.
as we grew, we yes, in a Porsche, I believe. That was
An
that was
open top
Fritz.
Porsche?
Yeah. But the beer industry, like all of beverage alcohol in America after Prohibition, was set up to be a three-tier system, and there are laws that say if you're over X amount, you must go through the middle tier, which is the distributor. If you're under X amount, you can self-distribute or you can do it locally. It depends on what market you're in. Every state, every county has different regulations.
Yeah, beer laws. It's super fun.
Beer law, beverage
Can you
alcohol
specialize
law.
in that in college?
Yeah, there are people who specialize in it who help us decipher all of the things that we need to do because we're in all 50 states, so we're in a totally different game, and we have to go through a middle tier. And because you're local,
Right.
you get to do that without that middle tier, and it's just a different business model.
I will say that we very much don't think it distinguishes like a good brewery from a bad brewery. We're not saying because someone uses a distributor, it's like a notch down by any means. I think what I mean by this is that we like installing large tanks and we like trucks.
I think you might share that in common with everyone here.
I love large tanks and trucks too. And we have both of those things too. They're fun.
So let me ask you guys. I think someone has said to me that it's almost like the Renaissance we saw in wineries. Now we've come to understand that wineries have their terroir from different parts of the country and the world, and that we are experiencing that now with craft brewing and starting to be able to really differentiate between different styles of brewing and different origins of the product that you work with. And at the same time, as a consumer of said product, it can be daunting to even distinguish among all the wonderful brands, even when they're all SF made. So what are the ways that you guys try to distinguish what you're doing? And Reagan, one thing I was curious about was the beer curator.
Yeah.
Is that one of the ways that you sort of distinguish what you can offer your customers?
I think so.
Like, what is it?
So what she's referring to, if you go to our website, one of the things we learned when we went out and had our feedback cards at the park was that people, San Franciscans in particular, like a lot of different types of beer, right? So there's people that want IPAs, they want sours, they want porters, everything, and that's what San Franciscans want, the best of everything, right? And so, so when we knew that we were going to open up our brewery and beer bar, we knew we were going to have anywhere from 12 to 16 beers on tap, right? Something for everybody. That's kind of one of the things that we really stand behind. So we do everything from lagers to IPAs to Belgians to sours. And so what we do is we rank every beer on a scale of hoppiness, basically 1 to 10, alcohol 1 to 10, and complexity from 1 to 10. And so when we built, again, kind of from my background, coming from business and science, decided to do a beer curator. So when a customer comes in or they're debating on coming into our brewery, they can actually go onto our website, see the live list of all the beers that we have on tap, and say, okay, I want a beer that has, it's 5 on the hoppiness scale, 8 on the alcohol scale, and 3 on the complexity. Complexity meaning it's very subjective, like something like, a Belgian's going to be more complex than a lager, right? And so it'll actually curate a list of the beers that we currently have on tap that you might like. And then you can actually save that profile, and then we can notify you when we brew a beer that matches that profile. So again, kind of blending this, tech and kind of, innovative, concepts around really, at the end of the day, around our customers, making sure that they're finding what they want. A lot of people can get overwhelmed by the choice out there, and so that's one of the things I think that we do that really, connects with customers. I wouldn't say it's a big differentiator. I mean, we're also in South of Market. We have a lot of people that play and computers all the time. So it's just a game like, okay, I'm at Adobe around the corner. Do I really want to go down there?
Gamifying your craft beer.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, seriously. And when you come down to it, it's from a customer and business perspective, it's just a longer period of time that someone's actually engaging with our brand and learning about what we're doing. And it's a way for us to communicate with them without necessarily having that in-person thing, which obviously we hold in high regard, and it's the best way to communicate with customers is face-to-face, but this is just another way that we can engage with customers, and so yeah, it's something we're super proud of, and we integrate it into our packaging and everything. So when you go to Whole Foods and you see our IPA, you can see how hoppy it is.
And it's a mobile app, right? So we should all
it's actually a mobile site
now.
Yeah. So that's the other thing. We deliberately made it a mobile site, like a mobile site, not an app, because who wants to download a beer app? So it's just on our website. Yeah.
And we were told that we could drop F-bombs occasionally to test.
Sorry.
So just so you know, Reagan is taking that
Have
one.
I over-allocated?
No. I think we said that
Sorry, guys.
do this, right? Didn't we agree? We were actually told we could do this.
I didn't see that in the rules.
Done.
I'm sorry.
Bam.
Score. You're winning.
So
My cutoff?
No, keep going. So from sort of like this marriage of tech and craft, then on the other side, I remember the first time I took a tour of Anchor, Fritz was sort of schooling us in the old craft method and the steam approach to how you guys brew, and then you've had to kind of evolve with the times while holding on to that. And I said I wanted to ask you about the beginnings of Go West and doing hoppier IPA brews, which was a little different from where you guys came from. What was that like?
I think it's a natural evolution of where we came from. If you look at where Fritz he bought a brewery that made one style of beer, Anchor Steam Beer, and was making it for like 3 bars. And so he had this wide open panorama of, I'm going to make beer for America. I'm gonna make beer that is gonna turn this country sideways on beer. And what he did was he built it very slowly and very methodically. And he started with taking steam beer, which was a beer made in San Francisco, a San Francisco style of beer that was only made here, only for here, and grew that very organically. He took Anchor Steam Beer and first made it exactly the way he wanted to do that. And by doing that, he created he didn't create a style, he preserved a style. There was a style of beer already called steam beer, which is known as California Common, which is San Francisco's own style of beer, born of necessity here in San Francisco, and is historically so important to what San Francisco beer is. He took that and he spent literally 8 years before he even began to innovate and make another style of beer. And then he made porter. And then after porter came Liberty Ale. After Liberty Ale came Christmas Ale. But Liberty Ale, when you look at what he did there, Fritz took a style of beer that no one was making in America, a pale ale, a dry hop pale ale, and decided to take a brand new hop out of the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, Cascade hop, and dry hop his beer, which literally no one was doing, and made a little niche beer here that people in San Francisco liked, and it managed to stay around and managed to grow volume and get shipped outside of San Francisco, and really that's where hoppy beers in America start. If you go back to any one starting point, 1975, sorry. 200 years after Paul Revere's ride, Fritz made a commemorative beer in the name of Paul Revere. He made a beer called Liberty Ale here in San Francisco that was dry hopped with the Cascade hop, and started dry hopping as a slow movement.
Dry hopping.
Dry hopping.
Valentine's Day, I told you.
Yes, as a slow
Wanna make sure I
movement
heard that.
here in Northern California, and other brewers caught on. There was a little brewery in Chico that managed to succeed in making a pale ale that used the Cascade hop miraculously to introduce to a wider audience that method of dry hopping, which led to IPAs, which led to all of the other things that were rediscovered in America and rediscovered with the craft beer revolution. It all started at Anchor. Yet we kind of kept our heads down and kept making steam and porter and Liberty Ale for a long, long time, and never made an IPA, a true IPA, until just a couple of years ago. And
So basically, everyone's saying, "Oh, wow, how different for Anchor to do that."
Yeah,
what you're
and
basically saying is, well,
everybody's-
it kind of started with us. And
yeah, and
Yeah.
it came back to all these other IPAs that are much more hop forward, much more aggressive, many more different styles. If you go East Coast, West Coast, whatever you want to look at, they're all happening now, and it all traces its roots back to Liberty Ale. For us to make IPAs in a modern style is still difficult. Our breweries, it was built in the 70s. It was built for making a specific style of beer. And for us to adapt has been challenging but fun. And
Well,
we're getting in the game.
nothing tastes. No other beer tastes like an Anchor beer. Like when you try the Anchor IPA, there's something about it that I think some critics will be like, oh, there's something they might not necessarily like, but I love it because you're like, this is Anchor beer at the end of the day, and you know it. There's something about it that's like truly unique that I don't find with really any other brewery.
Yeah.
So I promised I would keep this as light as possible, but I do want to ask, since you hinted, Scott, at, so there are certain challenges one has to do business here in San Francisco. And so one of the challenges for Anchor has been that you have an older factory and an older customized equipment that's specific to the style of beer that you have done up until now. Dave, with all of the undertakings that Magnolia has just done, what have been some of the challenges and what have been some of the bright spots in your work to expand your business?
The challenge is just the cost of doing business in San Francisco and the struggles with every step of the process, from permitting and more permitting. There's a lot of that, but it's got its rewards, or we wouldn't do it. And it felt really important to stake another kind of flag in the ground and say, well, no, we were kind of born in the hate of, and it became a San Francisco brand. This is our 20th year. It's nothing like Anchor, but we put in a chunk of time there, and so it's full of challenges to try to build a bigger brewery and do it in San Francisco. And when we were doing it in 2013, 14, it was very different than it was back in even the 90s when I started it. But it's been worth every one of those challenges because it just feels right. It feels like this organic, natural extension of the brand as the vision that I have for the brand. And so, I don't like to complain about it too much because it's I think the pros outweigh the cons. And
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in on that and say that doing business in San Francisco, while it's expensive, and there are hoops that you have to jump through, that every person I've worked with is like on our side. The people who are behind that, they care and they want us to succeed, and they're friendly, they're amenable, they get back to you. It's not like dealing with angry, lifeless bureaucrats. They're really energetic, wonderful people. Everybody that I've dealt with, whether it's with water or with permitting or with anything, and we managed to make things happen. We built a distillery, and we're about to put in a tap room across the street, and we feel the energy of the people who want us to succeed, who ultimately wield the stamp and make things move forward. They want the I's to be dotted and the T's to be crossed, but they want it to happen. They're not looking to us, they're not trying to be obstacles, they just want us to do it right, and so do we.
Reagan, Justin, as newer breweries on the scene, what's been your experience?
I actually don't think it's that hard to do to open a manufacturing business in San Francisco. I kind of think that's a somewhat it's a stereotype in a sense. I talk to brewers at national conferences that have opened small breweries in really small towns in other states. And they're like, oh, I wish I had a city the size of San Francisco to consume my products. So their rent might be cheaper. We have a lot of benefits. We have a lot of adventurous customers. We have like a thriving food and beverage community that you wouldn't find in some of these other places where cost per square foot might be cheaper. And in San Francisco, it's kind of interesting because we deal with both San Francisco and the federal government because we're in the Presidio, is a pretty easy city to deal with. I think it's a kind of misconception. I've dealt with construction projects in other cities, in small, really protected communities in Marin. Those are difficult cities to deal with. San Francisco has quite streamlined processes when it comes to making a business in San Francisco. So it's kind of funny when I hear that. They're like, oh, well, why would it must have been so hard doing this in San Francisco. And it's like, sure, you have to have the right number of bathrooms and you have to have ADA accessible entrance to your establishment, but those are good things. And I kind of think that myth needs to get beat down a little bit.
Yeah. How about you, Reagan? What's your experience?
I'll just jump in and say I would love that experience. Mine was not like that at all. I'll say it's not a myth, but it's, I think it also just really depends on the type of business that you're doing. We were trying to, that's, I think, one of the most challenging parts is what neighborhood you're going to be in, what zoning you're looking for, what type, are you going to allow people to come in? Are you serving food? There's just a lot of nuance to it, and I think it can be challenging. I think it can be easier. It's just a real, I think we get a lot of people that will come in and say, hey, you opened up a brewery, and what was your experience? And I really want to open one. And I think there's so much nuance to it. There's no real rubric to give somebody on how you can open up a brewery in the city. And I think there is a lot of layers to it. And I think anybody on the panel would agree, if you're going to open up a brewery, you really have to be quite committed to it. It's a long process. Even if it's easy, it's a long process, time is money, especially in the city, going back to one of the things that Dave was saying about it, just the cost of business of being in the city. But I would also agree with Justin. It's a great community here. I mean, there's a reason why it took us, for example, almost 2 years to find a location and almost 2 years to build it And if you've been to our place, it's small. It's not a large facility. But the point is that it takes a long time. The zoning is very limited in the city for manufacturing, and that's actually when I first met Kate, was looking for a location, and SF Made is such a great resource around finding the right types of zoning that allows for light manufacturing. I mean, one of the things I talk a lot about is when people ask about opening up a brewery. So a brew pub, this is kind of in the deets a little bit, but brew pub, for example, like Thirsty Bear or Magnolia's Haight Street location, it's a type 75, so you're predominantly a restaurant, you serve beer, but you can't distribute, and you can have a 15-barrel system, so say a system that produces 600 gallons of beer for every batch. We have a smaller system, but it took, we can only be in certain parts of the city because we actually distribute our beer. And so there's little nuances like that. Even though we produce less beer than, say, Thirsty Bear, we can only be in certain parts of the city that allow for a light manufacturing designation. So those little things, because manufacturing entails kegging, bottling, canning, all the things that are traditionally really loud and not friendly for residential neighbors. And so those places that allow those types of manufacturing facilities are really limited in San Francisco, and they're actually dwindling. Well, I don't know. Are they increasing, or are they?
They're very slowly. I think it's an interesting conundrum when we think about how to fit more manufacturing into the city. We currently have about 630 manufacturers, if you can believe it. Even I find that like, wow. But it ranges in size from 2-3 person operations in food and beverage or garment or other kinds of mostly consumer products, up to companies that are on the larger side, including Magnolia, and then up to Anchor. And part of the challenge is we're just putting everything into 7x7, literally 49 square miles is what we have to work with in the city. And in it, we are trying to fit technology companies and housing and industrial space. So one of the conundrums is what we have done, which other cities actually have been emulating, is we've created pretty strict zoning controls in the industrial parts of the city. What we have left, which are bits and pieces of the south of Market of Soma, parts of Potrero, Dogpatch, Bayview, and it's both protective, but it also means there's not a lot of it. So only the really industrial zone stuff doesn't have to compete with offices and other kinds of housing uses in the same space. So it's, I think that is one of the real challenges. And when we look at the work that we do, it still has to step back to be sort of a regional solution.
Yeah, we're in the process of looking for some space for a distribution center in the Bay Area, and it's kind of been interesting because we've looked at a lot of things on the perimeter of San Francisco, and it's really like a manufacturing space stock issue. It's not really a city of San Francisco or municipality of San Francisco kind of issue. How many square feet is the current Anchor building?
80,000.
Like if you guys wanted to go find an 80,000 square foot building in San Francisco, the rent actually would be cheap. Like that's like the kind of funny thing about it. You just wouldn't find the building where you could have an 80,000 square foot manufacturing facility. So then you end up kind of outside of the city. And it's really about the kind of type of spaces themselves. Actually, as soon as you get above a 30,000 square foot manufacturing facility in the Bay Area, the price per square foot kind of plummets because there's not the manufacturers to take it. So I kind of think people are like, oh, rent's really high, that's why there's not manufacturers in the city. It's like, well, no, we don't have big buildings because we don't have much land.
It's interesting. I think it's sort of, we see both going on. So, we see folks who are trying to get into, and actually it was in the news not long ago, Anchor had been trying to build a second larger brewery
on the bay, on Pier 48.
Pier 48, and has not been able to pursue that at this time. So I think there's both the conundrum
that's a
of
really complex issue there. I mean, the
that
main thing
breaks your heart, right? Because you want to see.
The main thing with that space is just that it needs seismic upgrades that are beyond the scope of what anybody's willing to pay for.
And that
so
is
it won't
often
happen.
the issue with the stock. If you look at, for example, West Oakland, which has a lot of industrial stock still available that is not fully utilized, but it's in such disrepair, many of those warehouse buildings, that it would take such substantial amounts of capital to make them ready that it would be a challenge. But the other piece that I think we all think about is the people who work at our breweries, and we all know about housing costs in the Bay Area and certainly in San Francisco. And Dave, how have you managed that with your team of people? And you've been hiring people. One of the other things SF Made does is partners with our companies to help them hire sometimes youth and others. So what's that experience like?
That seems to be at a low point in the in the entire time in the 20 years that we've been doing this. It's gotten harder and harder. The math doesn't work out very well, and the whatever pain points there are in trying to get a business up and running, those become they just go into the rearview mirror. You deal with them and you're done. But staffing is an everyday thing, and it's always in flux, and people have to live farther and farther out, commute longer and longer drives, and get up at 4:30. Somebody gets up at 4:30 to come into the brewery,
So they really love the craft.
They love what they do. They love
do.
they love the craft. They love the company and the team. So they're willing to make some insane sacrifices, not insane, but just that's not a normal. And the pay scale is. We try to be as generous
I guess
as we
it's
can.
normal if you live in like the boroughs of New York.
I guess that's
in
true.
In some ways, we're kind of becoming that regionalized and having to. People have to live in different places, and it's not necessarily.
I just hadn't seen that before. In the
Here.
first 10 or 15 years in business here, everybody lived almost walking distance or a short bus ride from Magnolia Pub. It was just that. I just took that for granted, and then it started to change. And now people are coming in from far East Bay, and they're motivated to do it, and it's awesome, and I'm grateful for it. But it's a thing that's on everybody's mind, and restaurants as much as breweries, if not more so.
Well, I guess it really speaks to the soul that these companies have, that you guys have, that you are able still to attract people, even in this climate right now, which, if you look forward on a more aspirational note, what would be the one or two things that you're most excited about doing for your individual breweries as you look forward into the future?
I'm really excited because I'm getting 3 more tanks. We talked about tanks. We'll be getting 3 more tanks this Saturday after next, which is exciting. So we talked about the love of tanks and trucks. I don't really have parking for trucks, so I just have one, and I have a lot of tanks, so that's exciting. And I think
Trucks and tanks.
Yeah, tanks. Yeah, so we'll be maximizing our space at local, and then our hope is to open up another one. Maybe not in the city just because of some of the hurdles, and but hoping to open up another small brewery in beer bar that is really either North Bay, South Bay, that's really centric on the neighborhood that it's in. So.
Great.
I can address that. The thing that we're most excited about is kind of more tanks too. But
I see. We have a theme.
No new trucks, but tanks. We have 2 buildings. One which is our brewery, and it's an old coffee roastery. It's an Art Deco building built in the 30s. It's magnificent piece of architecture. We have this warehouse just across the street that is also a very interesting piece of architecture. More mid-century warehouse with a roll-up door that we've used as kind of a staging area and all these other things. We are going to put right across the street from the brewery a pilot brewery and tap room, which is something brand new for Anchor.
Yeah.
We've had this brewery with tours that everybody believes you can't get into, but you actually can.
Tuesday mornings.
Yeah, Wednesdays too. Tomorrow morning, I bet it's wide open. So we have never, when I came there in 2014, 3 years ago, we didn't have any kind of pilot system because we just made Anchor Steam and a few other brands, and we developed a new brand once a year, and we'd just go for it, roll the dice and brew it on the big system, and we didn't really have a pilot brewery. We put in a little tiny pilot brewery that is basically a glorified homebrew kit that we've been using for the last 3 years, but we're going to put in a proper 7-barrel pilot brewery and tasting room right across the street. in a space where people can come in and buy a beer and sit down and like experience Anchor in a totally new way.
And when will this be opening?
We're opening in May.
Wow.
So
All
we're
right.
like marching forward with this. We're clearing out this warehouse. We bought the brewing equipment. We're gonna
how exciting.
We're gonna
great.
do something that is for us a totally new venue and a new opportunity to create and really nurture new beers and new brands and experiment in ways that we haven't been able to in the past, and bring people in and share that Anchor experience in a much more face-to-face way.
In 3 sentences, because I want to sort of end this little last piece, Reagan and Dave, something that you're both excited about in the future.
Already went.
You've already gone.
Oh, yes,
Then we've got Justin and Dave.
Something that's interesting at Fort Point is that we, on the manufacturing side of things, we're very much into hiring people who have little or no experience in manufacturing jobs. There's only one employee at our company who's actually brewing beer that's brewed beer at another company before. And we kind of have this internal training program, and the purpose of this program is kind of to make these manufacturing jobs viable within the city of San Francisco. So we very rarely hire for higher positions within the manufacturing space. We kind of have this entry-level position, and then you move up through the ranks through that. I think Anchor kind of had a very similar thing, or it has a very similar thing.
Yeah,
You
it's-
start on the
it's
packaging line,
exactly how we
and
do it.
you move up through the whole process, because it works really well, but also because in San Francisco it's going to be hard to kind of find those candidates at the higher level position, and it just feels good. So I'm excited about bringing these kind of people through that process.
And how many employees do you guys have now?
We're about 63.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Well done. Last word, Dave.
I'm most excited about sharing our beer with more people after 20 years. We're releasing beer in cans this week. And so we finally have a packaged beer. And I'm mostly excited about that because it means I can have 6 packs of Magnolia beer in my fridge at home. But our business model counts on other people also liking it. So
Last question, speaking of better from here, you each get a 60-second idea to make the world a better place.
Starting with
Just
you.
a small little thing, because this is a
Starts with
tradition
Dave,
of how
yeah.
we close.
Dave,
and
take
pause.
that way, come this
Ready, go.
You know, I'm going to keep it to the beer world.
Good.
Kind of keep it focused because
Yeah.
there's a lot of things we could talk about. There's a lot of the gamification going on. There's a lot of how many different beers have you tried? And there's a lot of pressure, from brewers themselves as well as people out there to always make new beers and a new beer every time they have a beer. It should be something new that they haven't had. And I got a text from a friend who was at Tornado in the Lower Haight, and he had tried a beer that's like a classic beer, and he's like, I just had this. Should I have this or this next? And I was like, well, just have another one of those, you that's good, you loved it, it's great. Why do you feel compelled to then have another one and just check another box? I go, then I tried this. And so I just feel like it'd be nice to remember that there's you form relationships with beers and beer brands, and it's more than just I tried this and now I'm going to try another 5 things. A lot of it's just remembering that there's just that social kind of democratic aspect to beer that it's a community building thing, and we come around it together and clink glasses and share pints, and just remembering that beer is just this great thing to drink sometimes, and you don't have to unlock a badge or check something off. Then that's it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, not gonna just being right smack dab in the middle of SF Beer Week. I have nothing profound here other than the 2 things that I'm dealing with right now is the fact that I have to love these eggs, and I know that's my last F-bomb. To every event, thank you. I have to lug these kegs to every event because I have a real small team, so it's me and one other person. Calling on the Amazon people to use their drones to drop kegs. And the second part of that is for the middle of SF Beer Week is for someone to invent a way to suck the calories out of beer. Take them away.
They
Keep
did.
the flavor. Keep the flavor. Just take
It's
the
not
calories
like
away.
beer.
They did. It's called Michelob Ultra.
No, keep the flavor. I said keep the flavor. That's the
blew
tricky
that.
part.
Yeah, they missed that part. All right. For me, when I heard this question, I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I'm not going to get political. I'm not going to do it. But
Yeah.
here it is. Here it is, people. And it's when I look at the whole world and who needs to lead what's going on in the world, I think it's right here in San Francisco. California first, San Francisco before that. So I'm going to tell you that as Californians, we need to support our viewpoint of what's right. And it's California. That's who you are. That's who this room is. You're the California Commonwealth. Whatever you believe in what's right as Californians. And just do that. All right?
All right.
That's it.
Idea
No
to
pressure.
change the world. I think people should and parents shouldn't encourage their children or force their children to try food that they don't normally try. I actually think that the food is this fairly amazing cultural conduit by which, you know, really people can learn a lot more about other cultures here in San Francisco. Like, we kind of have access to everything. So, you know, eat food you don't normally eat.
And drink beer you don't normally drink. So
you
on
go.
that, we will be standing up for those of you who wish to hang out and get the party started. And we're going to move the chairs out. And we have samples from all of these wonderful breweries. And thank you for joining us.